In the remote hills of northeastern India, nestled between thick forests and slow-moving rivers, there was a village so small it didn't appear on most maps. Rangathar. Life there moved to the rhythm of monsoons and harvests. Children played barefoot under banyan trees, elders smoked thin pipes and told the same stories they'd told for 50 years, and time felt like it had forgotten this corner of the world. 12-year-old Anika had never minded that. She belonged to the quiet. She didn't care for plastic toys or crowded markets. She cared about birdsong at sunrise, frogs hiding in rice paddies, and the wind rustling through sugarcane like whispers in a language only she understood. While other girls practiced dances or chores, Anika wandered the forest barefoot with a sling bag, a piece of charcoal, and a heart wide open to everything wild and broken. That's why, when the earth trembled with a sound too heavy to be thunder, Anika was the first to notice. It wasn't the roar of a truck or the snap of trees. It was a deep, aching sound. Something that didn't just fill the air, it weighed it down. She followed it. Not out of fear but curiosity. Past the banana grove, beyond the rusted fence where the goats wandered, through ferns taller than her shoulders. She moved like a shadow, her ears tilted toward the forest. And then, as the sound grew louder, she stopped. The old quarry. No one went there anymore. It had been abandoned decades ago, a hole in the earth left behind by men who took what they needed and never returned. Trees had swallowed it. Grass covered most of the edges. But it was still there. And now, lying deep in that forgotten pit, was something that made Anika's breath catch in her throat. An elephant. A giant. Motionless, crumpled in the dirt like a fallen statue. Mud caked its sides. One tusk was cracked near the root. Flies buzzed around an open wound on its shoulder. Its breath came out in broken gasps, and when Anika looked into its eyes, her chest tightened. The eyes were pale, clouded, empty. The elephant was blind. It didn't move when she stepped closer. It didn't trumpet or threaten. It just lay there, sides heaving, as if it had given up long before she arrived. But Anika saw something else. A twitch of the trunk, the slow swivel of one ear toward her footsteps. The elephant had heard her, felt her, and it wasn't afraid. She sat at the edge of the pit, staring down for what felt like hours. The sun had shifted behind the clouds by the time she whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." The elephant didn't answer, of course. But something in the silence felt alive. Back in the village, no one knew. No one had heard. No one would care, she feared, not in the way they should. The forest department was a 3-day wait at best. The men in charge would call it a hazard. Dangerous. Not worth the risk. But Anika knew what she'd seen. She ran home. Her father was out gathering herbs. She filled a basket with whatever she could find: turmeric roots, clean cloth, a jar of water, a broken-handled trowel. She grabbed the walking stick he used when hiking the hills, and ran back, her legs burning. When she returned to the pit, the elephant hadn't moved. She crept down the side, inch by inch, careful not to startle it. The pit was steep but not vertical. A thick vine coiled from a tree above, like a rope made by nature itself. She held it and climbed part way down, her bare feet pressing into soil, fingers trembling. "Don't move," she said, barely audible. Still, the elephant didn't react. The wound on its shoulder was deep but not fatal, not yet. With shaking hands, Anika mashed turmeric and leaves into a paste, whispered every word she could think of to soothe it, and pressed the medicine to the wound. The elephant flinched. A deep, low breath escaped its mouth. But it didn't strike. It didn't run. It accepted her. Over the next 2 days, she returned. Again and again. Quietly. Patiently. She brought fruit from home: bananas, soft mango slices, soaked rice. She found a hollow in the rock near the edge of the pit and filled it with water from her pot, watching as the elephant slowly began to reach for it with her trunk. She named her Ronnie. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the way the elephant held her head, even in pain. Or maybe because no one else would call her anything but the beast. Ronnie meant queen. And Anika believed she deserved at least that. The villagers didn't notice her absence. Children were always wandering. And she told no one. But she noticed something else. Ronnie's legs were beginning to swell. From lying down too long. From pressure. Her skin looked dry, cracked in places. There were bruises around her hips. She had likely fallen hard. Maybe wandered too far. Maybe heard something and fled the wrong way. Anika understood what no one had yet said. If Ronnie stayed in that pit, she would die. There was no way out. No slope. No path. The quarry walls were too steep for an elephant to climb. She had tried. Anika had seen the scrape marks, the churned earth where massive feet had struggled and failed. She needed help. But help would mean questions. Delays. Authorities. Anika knew what they would say. They'd want to sedate her. Move her with machines. Or worse, deem her too injured to be worth the effort. But Anika had a different idea. She would bring help. Real help. Not people in uniforms with charts and guns. People who could lift stones. Dig. Build. The next morning, she stood in the village square, barefoot, dust-streaked and shaking. Her voice was quiet but clear. "There's a blind elephant in the old quarry," she said. "She's trapped. And I'm going to build her a way out." Silence. Then laughter. But then something else, a voice behind her. "I'll help," her father said, stepping forward. He didn't ask questions. He just looked at her, and something in his face changed. "Where is she?" Anika led him. And he followed. That afternoon, 5 others joined, a retired mason, 2 young men who raised goats, a woman who had once treated a cobra bite with bare hands, and the schoolteacher who had always believed in strange children with big hearts. They stood at the edge of the pit. They looked down at the broken giant lying in the dirt. No one said it out loud, but they all felt it. She had been forgotten. Left to die. And this girl, this child, had refused to let that happen. "We dig," the mason finally said. "We build a ramp." Anika looked at Ronnie, who had lifted her trunk toward the sound of their voices. Her breath was steadier. Her wound, healing. And now, for the first time, she wasn't alone. The digging began at sunrise. No one knew if it would work. But Anika believed. By the 5th morning, the pit smelled of damp soil, bruised grass, and hope. Ronnie no longer lay completely still. She shifted her weight now and then, her trunk occasionally brushing the air as if feeling for something that might lift her. Her blind eyes moved toward sounds, voices, hammering, the scrape of metal against stone. She had begun to recognize Anika's voice so well that the slightest call from the girl would cause her ears to twitch. Anika had stopped going to school. No one questioned it anymore. Every day she arrived at the pit before sunrise and left long after the moon had risen. The others, her small crew of volunteers, came in shifts. The mason, Hari, had taken charge of the structure. He drew the slope in the dirt, measuring incline and depth with knotted rope and broken bamboo poles. "It has to be strong enough to hold her weight," he muttered again and again. "We only get one chance." They began digging, hauling buckets of earth, stacking flat stones into steps that curved along the slope of the quarry wall. It was slow, punishing work. They had no machines, no cement, only hands, crude tools, and conviction. Sweat poured into their eyes. Fingers blistered. The sun didn't care. The heat didn't pity them. But no one stopped. Word spread slowly through the village. Some came to watch. Most didn't help. A few whispered that the girl was cursed, a wild child protecting a dying beast. Others claimed she was bewitched, or foolish, or wasting her time. But Anika didn't hear them. She only heard the sound of rocks shifting, the soft whistle of Ronnie's breath, and the rhythm of her own heart. On the 7th day, the forest department arrived. 2 men in khaki uniforms stepped out of a battered white jeep, holding clipboards and suspicion. They took one look at the elephant and frowned. "She's too injured," one said, his voice flat. She's old, blind, weak. The humane thing is to put her down. The villagers froze. The tools stopped moving. Anika stepped forward, her voice shaking but loud. She's healing. She won't survive even if you get her out, the taller officer replied. We can't risk more people getting hurt. This isn't a zoo. It's a wild animal. She's not hurting anyone, Anika said, louder this time. She's only here because she fell. The officer scribbled something on his form. That's irrelevant. We'll return tomorrow with a tranquilizer team. This ends before someone gets killed. Anika's breath caught in her chest. She couldn't speak. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder, steady but silent. Ronnie stirred in the pit, sensing the unease, letting out a low, drawn-out rumble that vibrated through the trees. When the officials drove off, dust curling behind their tires, no one moved for a while. Then the mason said, "We work faster." And they did. They worked through the night. They lit torches, dug by lanterns, pulled stones until their arms ached and their knees bled. Even the skeptics returned. A farmer brought his ox to help move earth. A teenage boy who once mocked Anika arrived with a bag of rice and a shovel. A woman from the next village, whose brother had once been saved by an elephant during a flood, arrived in silence and began carrying buckets without saying a word. By morning, the ramp was halfway done. Still steep. Still rough. But it was forming, an arc of packed earth rising like a promise from the pit's base to the edge. That afternoon, something shifted. Ronnie stood. Not fully, her legs trembled, her weight swayed, but she lifted herself part way up and let out a soft trumpet that cracked in the middle like a sob. Her skin was flaking now, and her breath was short, but she was awake. Alert. Alive. Anika dropped to her knees and wept. Not because she was afraid, but because she knew Ronnie hadn't given up. The tranquilizer team didn't return the next day. Whether it was a delay, a forgotten order, or something more mysterious, no one ever found out. But they didn't wait to find out either. Hari shouted at everyone to hurry, to finish before orders could change. 3 more days passed. They lined the ramp with extra stones, added thick logs for traction, poured water on the dust to keep it firm. Anika barely slept. She brought fruits soaked in honey to keep Ronnie's energy up, humming old folk songs while feeding her from a flat stone plate. The elephant leaned closer now when she spoke, as if trying to memorize her words. On the 12th morning, the ramp was ready. Or ready enough. No one had tested it. There was no way to be sure. But the air was heavy with expectation, like the whole forest was holding its breath. Anika stepped to the edge. She didn't speak to the crowd. Only to Ronnie. "You're not alone anymore," she said, her voice so soft it barely carried past the trees. "There's a way up now. If you're ready." Ronnie lifted her trunk. Her ears twitched. Then, slowly, shakily, she turned. The first step was uneven. Her foot sank slightly, slid, then held. The second step was firmer. By the third, her trunk was searching, testing, moving like a blind man's cane. The entire hillside went silent. Not a bird. Not a breath. Even the insects held their song. With each step, dust rolled down the ramp, stones shifted, and hearts beat faster. Halfway up, she paused. Her legs shook. Her body swayed. Her back foot slid an inch. Someone in the crowd gasped. Another whispered a prayer. Anika took one step forward and whispered, "You're almost there." Ronnie's ear turned toward her voice. And then, she moved again. 3 more steps. 4. Her front feet found the final ledge. She heaved, pulled, lunged, and collapsed onto the grass outside the pit. She was out. The blind elephant that had been left for dead, forgotten in a quarry, lay gasping on her side, covered in sweat and dust and blood, but free. The crowd exploded. Cheers, tears, shouts, prayers. Anika didn't hear any of it. She dropped to her knees beside Ronnie, touching her trunk gently, whispering, You did it, Ronnie. You came home. That night, the village lit lanterns for the first time in years. Children danced in circles. Elders clapped their hands to old drums. And in the center of it all, lying on a bed of hay and wildflowers, was Ronnie, her breath steady, her blind eyes soft, and her body wrapped in garlands placed by children who once feared the forest. No one remembered who started calling her that. But by the time the moon rose, everyone in Rangathar knew her by one name only. Ronnie, the queen of the quarry. And the girl who brought her back. They called her the Elephant Whisperer. But Anika didn't want titles. She only wanted Ronnie to live. And in that, she had succeeded. Ronnie didn't walk the day after her rescue. Or the next. Her legs had been too long folded under her own weight, and the infection in her shoulder had worsened before it began to heal. But she was alive, and she was free. And for the people of Rangathar, that was more than enough, for now. They cleared a space for her just beyond the quarry, in a soft hollow between trees where the sun broke gently through the leaves. Anika made sure it was quiet. She placed ash leaves around the edges to keep insects away and brought fresh water 3 times a day from the river with help from 2 village boys who no longer called her strange. Ronnie didn't eat much at first. Anika tried everything: bananas, sweet grass, jackfruit, rice mash, but the elephant barely touched them. Sometimes she would curl her trunk around the food and then let it fall back to the ground. She seemed tired, as if freedom had taken more from her than the pit ever had. Anika refused to let her go. Every morning she knelt beside her, humming lullabies her mother once sang. She pressed cool cloths to Ronnie's cracked skin and swatted away flies for hours at a time. She told her stories too, about the village, about the birds in the trees, about the time she found a squirrel hiding in her satchel and kept it as a secret pet for a week. Whether Ronnie understood or not didn't matter. It was the listening that counted. After 4 days, the elephant accepted a whole coconut. After 7, she stood. Unsteady. Swaying. But she stood. And Anika wept. Ronnie's recovery was slow, but steady. Her wound closed, her appetite returned, and she began to walk. First just a few steps, then across the hollow. Children would come to watch, standing behind trees, peeking with wide eyes. They left offerings: guavas, woven garlands, clay figures of elephants painted with crushed berries. No one feared her anymore. News traveled faster than Anika expected. A forest officer from the district capital arrived in a crisp uniform, carrying a camera, a file, and a tight smile. He asked questions. Who authorized the rescue? Who built the ramp? Who made medical decisions? When no one answered, he sighed. You understand that this animal is government property, he said finally, writing something in a notebook. It must be relocated to the rehabilitation center near Jorhat. Within 2 weeks. Anika felt her chest freeze. She just got out, she said. She isn't ready. We have trained staff and veterinary care there, the man replied. And we don't let wild elephants live in villages. It's not safe. It's not legal. She's blind, Anika said. She can't survive in the wild. And she's not hurting anyone. It's not your decision, he replied flatly. That night, Anika didn't eat. She sat by Ronnie in the dark, resting her forehead against the elephant's warm side. The fireflies blinked lazily around them, and in the distance, jackals howled. What if they take you? She whispered. What if they lock you up again? Ronnie stirred. Her trunk brushed Anika's arm, soft and slow, and for a moment, Anika felt like she was being comforted instead of the other way around. She had saved Ronnie once. But saving her again might take more than a ramp. The officer returned 3 days later, this time with a second jeep, 2 forest guards, and a metal cage on a trailer. He explained the process. Ronnie would be sedated, transported by road, evaluated by experts, possibly transferred to a sanctuary in Assam. The crowd gathered quickly. They hadn't realized what was coming until the first needle appeared. The guards moved slowly, carefully, like men approaching a live wire. Ronnie stood beneath a tree, calmly chewing palm leaves, her ears shifting toward their footsteps. Anika stood in front of her. "No," she said. The officer's expression barely changed. "Step aside. She doesn't want to go. You're a child." Anika didn't move. Her father stepped beside her. Then the mason. Then a dozen others. "She belongs here," said the schoolteacher. "She didn't hurt us. She made us better," said a woman who once feared even stray cows. "If you want her," said the old goat herder, "you'll have to take all of us too." The officer looked at them. He looked at the elephant. And then he made a call on his radio. The guards didn't use the needle that day. The jeep turned back. The trailer left empty. But the warning was clear. This was not the end. The following week, a journalist arrived. Then another. Then a film crew from Guwahati with plastic smiles and expensive microphones. They called it a miracle. They called Anika a child prodigy. The girl who saved an elephant. She hated the cameras. Hated how they tried to script her words. Ronnie didn't like them either. Too much movement, too much noise. Anika gave only one interview, and even that was short. "She's not a symbol," she said. "She's just an elephant who didn't deserve to die alone." The clip went viral. Soon the emails started coming. Donations from around the world, offers to adopt Ronnie, to fly her to wildlife centers in other countries, to use her in documentaries, to name scholarships after her. The village was confused. Anika was angry. They didn't understand. This wasn't about fame. It wasn't about elephants in glass walls or foreign foundations. It was about one creature. One fall. One voice that reached her from the bottom of a pit and begged not to be forgotten. And that voice still lived just beyond the forest, where a blind elephant walked in slow circles through dappled light, learning how to be wild again, without fear. The government relented. Eventually, under pressure from journalists, public letters, and growing interest from international wildlife organizations, they agreed to leave Ronnie under temporary village custody, a strange phrase that made Anika laugh. As if Ronnie belonged to anyone. A team of real veterinarians came. They checked her eyes, her legs, her blood. They confirmed what Anika already knew: Ronnie would never survive alone in the forest. But she wasn't a danger either. She was calm, aware, responsive. The recommendation was unusual but clear. Let her stay. So they did. A bamboo fence was built, not to keep Ronnie in, but to keep curious visitors out. A team of volunteers formed to manage food, water, and medical needs. Children were taught how to move slowly around her. Tourists were discouraged. Donations were used to build a small shelter for shade and a water tank nearby. They called it a sanctuary. Anika called it home. The villagers still told stories at night. But now, they had a new one. The girl who refused to listen to fear. The elephant who refused to die. The pit that became a path. Ronnie walked farther now, sometimes down to the edge of the fields where farmers left her sugarcane stalks, sometimes to the stream where she bathed, her trunk spraying water like a fountain. Anika no longer sat beside her all day. She had school again. But every afternoon, without fail, she returned with a bag of bananas, a song in her throat, and a secret smile on her lips. They didn't need words. They had something better. A memory, shared between them, of what it meant to fall and be caught. And every time Ronnie brushed her trunk against the girl's shoulder, Anika felt it again. The promise. You're not alone. Not anymore. The rains returned before the season expected them. Thick clouds rolled over the hills like smoke, and the first thunder cracked loud enough to make the elders glance skyward with unease. In Rangathar, rain was more than weather. It was a shift. A season of things being washed away, and things being reborn. Anika turned 13 the same day the first monsoon storm soaked the earth. There was no cake. No party. Just the soft sound of rain on the thatched roof, and a mango placed quietly in her hand by her father before sunrise. She smiled. It was enough. Ronnie had grown stronger in the months since her rescue. The scar on her shoulder had faded into a pale ridge. Her gait, though cautious, had steadied. She could walk from the edge of the sanctuary to the stream and back without needing to pause. Her ears no longer drooped. Her trunk explored everything: bamboo stalks, tree bark, the backs of sleeping dogs. She had learned the layout of the clearing so well, she barely stumbled anymore. And yet, something had changed. She didn't always come when Anika called now. Sometimes, she chose to stay under the trees, listening to the wind instead of the girl's voice. Other times, she walked further than anyone had seen before, lingering near the woods until sunset, as if testing the edge of something invisible. Anika noticed. She didn't try to stop it. She knew what it meant. The bond between them had never weakened. But Ronnie, for the first time, no longer seemed like something broken. She seemed whole. One morning before school, Anika found her standing at the far edge of the forest, right where the first trees began, where light turned to shadow and vines coiled like sleeping snakes. Ronnie's ears were still. Her trunk hung low, twitching just slightly as it brushed the ground. Her body faced the trees. But her head was turned. She was listening. Anika stood beside her for a long time. Neither moved. Then Anika reached out and placed her hand against the warm, rough skin behind Ronnie's ear. "You want to go," she said. The elephant didn't answer. She didn't have to. That evening, Anika didn't return to the sanctuary. She stayed at home, lying on the woven mat by the door, eyes open to the ceiling as rain tapped the world clean outside. She didn't cry. Not really. But her throat ached in that way it does when something dear begins to slip from the place you thought it would always be. In the morning, she went to the stream. Ronnie was gone. There were no signs of panic. No broken fences. No frightened animals. Just deep, steady footprints leading into the forest. And silence. Anika followed. Not to bring her back. Just to be sure she wasn't alone. The trail curved through the undergrowth, up the ridge, past the wild figs and blackened tree stumps. Birds flitted between branches overhead, calling in strange songs that felt older than words. After half an hour, Anika saw her. Standing still. Not lost. Just waiting. Ronnie turned her head slightly when she heard the girl's footsteps. Anika didn't speak. She walked to her side, reached up, and rested her hand just below the old scar. They stood like that, together, at the edge of everything. "Do you remember the pit?" Anika said softly. "I do. I remember how you looked up. How I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I had to try." Ronnie's ear flicked. Her trunk curled upward, brushing Anika's shoulder in a movement that was both farewell and gratitude. "You're not mine," Anika whispered. "You never were." And with that, she stepped back. And Ronnie walked. Into the trees. Into the silence. Into whatever came next. She didn't look back. Anika didn't follow. She sat beneath the fig tree for a long time. The forest was quiet in the way only forests can be. Full of life, but still enough to let a person feel every beat of their own heart. The light shifted slowly, turning golden as it filtered through the canopy. And finally, she stood, brushed the dirt from her hands, and walked home. The villagers asked, of course. "Where is she? Will she come back? Is she safe?" Anika answered simply. "She's free." No one argued. The months passed. And then years. Ronnie became a story. Then a legend. Then something more. Her prints were sometimes spotted near the far river. A farmer claimed he saw her once, calmly drinking at dawn while birds perched on her back. No one ever saw her with a herd. She was always alone. Always moving. But always remembered. Anika grew. Taller, quieter, thoughtful in a way that made people pause when she spoke. She finished school. Refused scholarships that wanted her to perform her story. She studied animal behavior. Learned more about memory, trauma, healing. But no book ever taught her more than what she learned at the edge of that pit. They tried to name the sanctuary after her. She refused. They named it after Ronnie instead. Ronnie Sanctuary. A place for the broken, and the blind, and the forgotten. For creatures that needed time and space, not cages. For elephants, yes, but also injured deer, orphaned monkeys, abandoned goats, even scared children who came to volunteer and ended up staying longer than planned. Anika ran it. Quietly. Not as a hero. Just as someone who once heard a cry and answered it. They built a statue eventually. Not a grand one. Just a carved stone of an elephant, her trunk raised, standing beside a barefoot girl with her hand outstretched. No face. No names. Just a plaque with a sentence. Sometimes, falling is not the end. It's how you're found. And sometimes, it was enough. One monsoon evening, many years later, a young boy arrived at the sanctuary gate, soaked to the skin, carrying a wounded parrot in his arms. He didn't speak. Just looked up at the woman on the porch and waited. Anika took the bird from his hands, wrapped it in cloth, and smiled. "You're in the right place," she said. And in the forest beyond, somewhere deep and still, a branch cracked under something heavy. Something old. Something free.